cloud. Okay, so I already have installed Xcode, whatever version that you have, that's perfectly fine. And I usually, whenever you're learning a programming language, it's a good idea to use playgrounds. Playground simply means that it doesn't really have any interface, although you can create it, but it will allow you to quickly process the language and give you the result. So I'm just going to create a very blank playground, whatever you want to call it. So let's go ahead and call it whatever. And this is what you would probably see in the playground. All right. And in order to run the playground, there's a play button. You can run the playground. You should see the result on the right-hand side in the pane. And if you print something, then you should see the result on the bottom part, this part. All right. And since this is a very, very, very basic introduction to Swift, we're going to start with data types. Then we're going to look into a little bit into functions, conditions, arrays, and let me double check it. I think that's pretty much it, arrays and loops. So I think that's what we're going to cover. But if you have any questions, you can just stop me and ask me any questions. All right. So let's start with variables and constant. And the good thing about Swift or any language is that once you learn it over here in this, in any language that you learn, those things are transferable, meaning you can simply go ahead and do all of those things in any other language. All right. So starting with variables, simple thing, name is the variable, and the value of that variable is string. All right. Okay. Same thing with age is a variable and the value is 45. So string means alphabets, numbers, or combination. This is just integer, which means it's only numbers. You can have like some sort of amount, which can be decimal. So that can be float. And you can have other things also. Let's say we can have other things like is active. What's the data type of this one? And this anyone can answer.
Boolean.
Boolean, so you already know this stuff. All right. True and false, simple stuff. In Swift, if I try to change this value, and we declared the age over here as integer, and now I'm changing it to 56, then it's complaining, and it's telling us that you can't really change the age because you have defined it with let. Let simply means it's a constant. It cannot be changed. So probably we can write it over here. Let means constant, and it cannot be changed once it has been assigned. So you can think of values, well, age can change obviously, but you can think of values like value of pi, 3.142. So if you try to change the value to something, it's gonna start complaining that you can't do that. You just created it with let, so you can't really change this value, and it's complaining. You can see that. All right, so how do we change the value? Well, you simply create it or with the var keyword. Var keyword means variable, and it can allow you to reassign it with a different value or the same value if you want. All right, so these are the most basic data types. String, you have integer, float, Boolean, let meaning constant cannot be changed. Var means something that can be changed. So var variables can change the value. All right. Let's move to functions. Function simply means that there's a bunch of code that will be executed and it will serve one and only one purpose. So if I want to create a function, greet, I would probably create it something like this. And I can go ahead and say, hello, John. So this is a very simple function. When you call this function, it will simply print out, hello, John. How do I call that function? Well, simply by calling it greet, and that's it. So this means that whenever you call this function, whatever is in the function gets executed. So it will simply print out, hello, John. But right now, whenever we call this function, it always prints out hello, John. Well, I want to create a function where I can pass in the name I want to print out. So I will say greet variable or the parameter that you pass, and then you simply print it out. So this particular greet function is a little bit more flexible because I can call this function and I can pass in a name, and that name will be printed out on the screen or on the console in this case, Mary. Both two functions can have the same name, but they are differentiated because this function, number one, does not take any arguments, but this function actually does take an argument of name. So that is what is differentiating between the two. The other thing you will notice over here is when I'm calling the second function, I'm passing in the name label, which goes to the name. Sometimes you don't really care that much about the name label or any label, then you can use an underscore. Underscore simply means that when I'm calling this function, I'm not going to be passing in the label name. I will simply pass in the name. All right, so you can do that in Swift. Names of the function should be camel case, same with the variable names. You can see that camel casing is a little bit, you can see it's over here. And I think the reason they call it camel casing is kind of like a hump, which is like a camel casing. You can see that the first letter or the first alphabet of the first part is small, and the second part, A, is capital or uppercase, and so on. So camel casing, very important in Swift. I mean, it will still work if you case it differently or if you name it differently, but you have to make sure you follow the convention of camel casing. So Swift is camel casing. And if anyone has any question, you can just interrupt me and ask question, but all right. All right, so what about a function that takes two arguments? Well, you can create a function called name or a greet, which can take two arguments now. You can see that it's taking two arguments, and now I can print out the name, and I can print out age. Now I can call the greet function with two arguments, name, let's say John Doe, and age, which is whatever. And so on. You can create functions with multiple arguments and so on. All right. What's going on over here now? I think we messed up somewhere. Cannot convert type to the expected type string. I think our name is colliding with each other. So let's go ahead and say different functions. Say hello, and the name, and the age. And now we can print out the name, and we can print out the age. If I want to call say hello, I need to pass in the first argument and the second argument. All right. If you want to display it in one line, you can also do string interpolation. My name is, and then you inject something over there, and my age is, and then you inject something over there. So this means that you will have, sorry, this one, name will be injected right there, and the age will be injected right there. So it allows you to easily write longer sentences. All right. So now I can run this. It's just going to say my name is John Doe and my age is 56. So this is a function that takes two arguments. Function can take 3 arguments, 4, 5, 10, but less is always more whenever you are calling a function. This means a function that takes less argument, it's much better than the function that takes way many arguments. Return a value I'll add, which will take A and return the value. So this function, which is in, and this is where it is that this function is going to return an int, meaning an integer type. So now we're passing whatever the integer we're passing. Let's say we pass in 2 and we pass in 3. So it's going to do 2 plus 3. And whatever the result of 2 plus 3 is, 5 will be returned to the person who called the function. So I can call the function add. I can pass in 2. I can pass in 3. And it will return me something, but that something will be returned on the left-hand side. And right now, since there is nobody on the left-hand side, it just goes away to nowhere. So yeah, over there, which can grab that. Now it's going to return as it's going to call result, which you can see, right? So if you have done so now you should be able to hear it, hopefully. Okay. Yeah, so you can ask the question in the chat, or you can just. All right, let me double check that one. Okay. All right. Function. Maybe it's just the timing of the day. All right, let me. There we go. I'm connected wired, so it should be good, hopefully. Conditions. More than if you're more than you're an adult and things like that exist in programming. If less than 18, you are not adult. All right, so simple this, else print this. If I run this, you will see that it is saying you are an adult because the age is defined as 45, which is more than 18. That's why the else blocks. All right, so this will, if an else table over here, let's call it user age, let's say 34, and citizen, and will be based on two things. So if age is greater than 18 and citizen is equals to US, both conditions have to be true. You are greater than 18 and US citizen. So both conditions have to be true because of this AND operator. So that's one of the things that is in Swift language and pretty much in all the languages, the AND operator, which means the left-hand side or the right, and both, all the conditions in the if must be true. All right. The other one is the OR operator, which is written by like this. And this means that either you have to be greater than 18 or you have to be a US citizen for this line to get executed. All right. Well, in this case, I guess both of them are true. But if I change the user age to 10, it will still be, this line still get executed because this part is still true. Citizen is set to US. So that's the reason that this particular condition will be true. If I do something like this, then both conditions are not true because this is not true, even though this is true, but both have to be true. All right. Okay. Now, based on this, and if you have access to Xcode, and if you have, hopefully everyone has access to Xcode, because I do want to do some very small activities. Based on this, based on the conditions that you have learned, would you be able to create an application that will tell you if the letter is a vowel or not? So if I have a letter over here and I'm assigning it a value, let's say C, how can I find out that if this letter is a vowel or not? How would you solve that problem? If somebody asks you in the interview that you need to write the code which will check if this letter is vowel or not a vowel. And vowels are basically letters which are A, E, I, O, and U. So anyone who wants to go? What code should I write, or what will be my logic to check if the letter is a vowel or not? This can be an interview question that they can ask. Probably using if check, right? If letter is equals to A, then we can say it's a vowel. But A is not the only vowel or only letter that is a vowel. Then we can use this part, or. E, or letter is A, E, I, O, U. So I, if letter is or, O, or the letter is U. So this code will hopefully check that if the letter is vowel or not, and make sure that you're putting double equals to, not a single equal to. Questions?
Yeah, I do have two quick questions. Again, I'm still kind of new, but in terms of, I guess, memory and data management, would it be easier to have done like a switch statement, or in terms of the loop, just kind of do a if else until you get to last? In terms of data storage, again, I'm still fairly new, so I'm just trying to, I guess, understand which one's more efficient.
Yeah, so I guess your question is, what about if I say something like this? If letter is equals to A, then say print
vowel.
Vowel. Now you can do else if also. Else if is going to fire if the first if is not going to work. So if E, and then we can say, and this is fine. I mean, it will produce the same result. I think the only difference will be you might end up writing a little bit more code. And you might end up writing more print statements.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
And you can see that in my implementation, I only have one print statement on line 76. So less is usually more if it's clear. Yeah, so this, but in terms of performance, it will be, both will be very, very much same. I mean, it's not going to be like, oh, this code that you're writing is going to be slower. It might be, but it will be such a small difference that it's not even going to be, nobody will care about it.
Yeah, perfect.
All right. All right, so let's go ahead and run this code. Let's see if it works. So this should be, well, I guess we should probably put a else also, not val, because C is not a val, so it should print not val somewhere. There we go, it's printing not val. And if I say A or E, it should say val. All right, so it looks like it's working fine. But do you think we can improve this code a little bit more? So it's always a good idea to have your code inside a function. So probably a good idea to create a function and put this code in there. Why? Well, because somewhere later down the road, I might have to do this calculation or run this code again. If I don't have a function, then I literally have to copy paste it 10 different places, like maybe down the road, like over here, I'm doing something and I'm like, oh, I need to find out if the letter is val again. Well, then I copy pasted it, which is pretty bad. All right. So how can we convert this into a function? We can just go ahead and create a function. Function is val, you pass in a letter, which will be string, and it's going to return you Boolean, meaning either true or false. Let's put this code in there. And right now you can see it's not really returning you true or false. So I'm just going to say true. And I guess if it's not this, then we will simply probably return false. So now it's a little bit much better because now all the code is right there inside a function, which I can call. So I can say over here, if is val, calling the function with a particular letter, let's say E. If it is val, then go ahead and say val, else you can say something else, not val. So always try to encapsulate your code inside a function so that you're able to reuse this. Now, if later down the road, I need to find out if the letter is a val or not, well, I can simply call this function and that's it. So nice and simple and very compact. All right. Any other questions? Okay, let's see. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, this might be a rookie question, but something I always get kind of caught up on. What's the key difference between a return versus print? I mean, return, are you just kind of returning the data back into your code versus print, where it's more so of just one-off situation where you can't really use it anymore?
So print is something that when I print something, whatever I'm printing, that thing, the string or whatever I'm printing is just printing on the console.
Oh, okay.
So I can see it. While
okay.
Yeah, and the return, you can only return from a function, and the return means that this actual value is going to be returned.
Okay.
Yeah, and any code that I type after the return, like this will not be executed.
Okay.
So this code, and you can actually see, it's actually telling you that code after the return will never be executed. Return simply means that you're returning a value. If we scroll up over here to our add function, right there, you can see that it's returning the value A plus B, whatever the A plus B, whatever it calculates to, that value is going to be returned to the person who's calling. So over here, we call the add function, we pass in 2 and 3. This means 2 is going to be in A, 3 is going to be in B, 2 plus 3, meaning 2 plus 3. It's going to be 5. So when this function actually returns, it returns the value 5 to the left-hand side into the result.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. All right, let's move to arrays. Arrays simply means that it's kind of like a data structure which can hold multiple items. All right, so let's go ahead and create a simple array. Friends, it's an array of strings. And I will say John, and I will say Stephen. So this block bracket is indicating that it's an array, and this array list, same thing. It contains 4 different items: Alex, Mary, John, and Stephen. And if you want to look at it from a point of view how it is actually stored, it is stored something like this. Alex is stored on the top as a string. Mary is right there next. Then we have John, and then we have Stephen. And an array in pretty much all the languages starts with an index number 0. That means if you want to access Alex, you can go ahead and say friends, the name of the array, and the index. So that will give you access to the first item in the array, which is Alex. It's not going to take out from the array or anything like that. It's just going to hold the value of the first item of the array. All right. So if I say over here, if I say over here 5, that's going to be a problem, because array 5, there's not a valid index, meaning there is no one at number 5. And you can see it's kind of like stuck right now. I don't think it's working, but I think it should give you an error that index out of range or something like that. But an array of 5, there's nothing, nobody on number 5. Here we go. You can see that it's an actual error, fatal error. Fatal error basically means that your application will probably crash at that point. So very important that you access only the items that are in the array, or else that's going to be an issue. All right. Now, how do we go about in an array? How do we, access different items of the array? We can access different items, as I said, by using the index, friends of 0, friends of 1, and so on. But sometimes we have like hundreds of items. We can't just type the index 0, 1, 25, 26. I mean, that's going to take forever. So we can loop over the array. All right. So let's see. For index in, and that's kind of like a weird syntax, but this is what we're doing is we're trying to run a loop for starting from 1 till 20. Nothing to do with the array. This is basically saying that go ahead and run a loop, for loop. Loop means that this thing is going to happen like 20 times, because I'm saying 1 to 20. So run 1 to 20 times and print index, the value of the index. And that is what we're printing out. So whatever thing is in the loop means it repeats. How many times does it repeat? Well, it repeats based on the criteria that you're putting over here. Right now, you're just saying that the loop should run from 1 to 20. If you say 1 to 5, and ... means that 1 and 5 are included, then you will see the number run from 1 to 5. All right. Now, if I want to access an item of an array, if I want to print it, I can say friends and pass in 0. And then print it, obviously, so that we can actually see it on the screen. So it only prints Alex. What can I do to print Alex, Mary, and John, and Stephen? What do you think I can do over here? And Jen C, who can answer this? If I want to print out the Alex, Mary, and John, and Stephen, what am I doing wrong?
You should change 0 to index.
Change 0 to index. What about this thing? Whoa, how many items are there? 1, 2, 3, 4.
Oh, yeah. Should change that to 4.
So
Yeah, change that to 4. No, yeah, but that still wouldn't work. Yeah. You need to change 1 to 0.
Count.
all right, so this
Yeah,
will
you
be
need to
changed to
start with
0.
0.
All right,
And before should be 3.
before should be 3. Because index arrays, index always start with 0. 0, 1, 2, and 3. So whatever the range is over here, the index will be assigned that value, and then it will be incremented, and then it will be incremented, and so on. So now we'll be able to print out all the items of the array.
Would you be able to do just friends that count, or?
Yeah, so that will be much better, because if anyone go and add another friend name, now if I run this is a problem, because Jerry is not going to be included, because it only goes from 0 to 3. So Alex still Steven, and you can see it's not running right now. But let's go ahead and fix that. We will go ahead and say friends dot count, which means that whatever the friends count is, you will run less than that count, because we are always going 1 less. So this means that now hopefully it will be able to run however many number of times, like 5 times, because the friends.count means the count of the items inside the friends array. I'm not sure why it's not printing. You can see, well, let me go ahead and stop this and run it again. Sometimes you'll see playground is not working. You just have to press this stop button and start over again. And now you can see that it's printing out all of them. All right. Now, there are many different ways of looping through things. You can loop through, if you just want to go through an array, you can also say for name in friends and then print the name. Well, what does that mean? Where is the index? Well, this is a different kind of a loop. And if you use this loop, which does not provide the range, this part, then this means the name will be each item of the array. So this loop is also going to run 5 times, and each time this variable name, or it can be any variable, will be the actual content of the array. So the result will kind of like exactly the same. You can see this is the result. The only difference is that this loop doesn't really require index. And you can call this anything you want. You don't have to call it name. You can call it XYZ, but make sure you name it in a way that you can understand what's going on. All right. Questions? Any question regarding loops? Now, I'm just giving you like the very basic. Obviously, if you want to go deep dive into loops, and definitely that should be something that you should do on your own time, but hopefully it will give you an idea of how loops actually work. All right. Okay, so with this information, can we write, with the information that you have with the loops and the arrays, can we write an application that will find out if the word is a palindrome or not? Palindromes are those words which, if you read from left to right and right to left, they are both the same. So mom is a palindrome. Because if you read from left to right, it's MOM, but if you read from right to left, it's MOM too. All right. So same way, dad is a palindrome. Cat is not a palindrome, because cat turns into tack. So that is not palindrome. All right. So how can we create an application? And that's, again, a great question for interviews. If you're going for interviews, that's a great question that they ask, that write an application that will find out if the word is a palindrome or not. So how can we find out if the word is a palindrome? I'll create a word over here. We'll start with cat, which we already know it's not a palindrome. So what do you think will be the first thing we can do in order to find out that if the word is a palindrome or not?
you can create a function and pass in a word. Then at that point within the function, I'd say you can create some sort of if statement that's conditional, comparing the word equaling to the word dot reverse.
Okay. Is there word dot reverse? Word dot reversed. Okay, so there is something, returns the view presenting the elements of the collection reverse order. What about if you don't, if you're not allowed to use built-in reverse function? So here's our function called is palindrome. And now we can call this is palindrome, passing in the word. So I'll just pass in cat. But now we need to implement this function. And we're not allowed to use any other reverse word functions. All right, so the first thing I would do probably is try to see if I can print out individual characters of the word that you're passing. So let's start with saying for index, just using the loop, in, and starting with 0, and probably going till word dot count. So we're using the for the index loop, and I'm just trying to see if I can, what will happen if I do something like this? Kind of like looping through the actual word, where word is cat. Okay, so already it doesn't really like that. All right, let's go ahead and see if we can wrap this, kind of like this, word of index. So the first question is, well, it's not working over here. Subscript is unavailable, cannot subscript file with int, use a string dot something, something, something. So another option would be for us, would be to make sure that we are using the indexes. So indices, you can start with word dot indices. All right, so now there's a property on the word which is going to give you the indices, meaning 0, 1, 2. And that is something we can pass in over there and get a string. If I remove this part, and if I don't convert it into a string, then this is going to return me, I believe, a character. We can double check it. Well, I guess we have to move it into a value. Character equals to, and that is sometimes the reason that you're not able to assign this correctly. But here we go. You can see a little bit. It's not a string that it returns, it's a character that it returns. But anyway, let's go ahead and try to print this out and see that what is printed out in the terminal. So in the terminal, in the console, you can see that we are able to print out individual characters of the word that you pass in, and you're passing cat, and we're able to print out C, A, and T. So every time this loop runs, it prints out CAT, but we want to print it in reverse order. So how about we do words.indices.reverse. So it should hopefully print out TSC. Okay, so that is good also. All right. But now using this reverse loop, we can probably construct a string which will be called TAC, which will hold the value TAC, so that eventually we can compare. So I'm going to go ahead and probably create a new variable over here, reversed word. And that's not the only way, obviously. There are like infinite number of ways you can do this activity. And I'll say reverse word plus equals to, meaning add something to the reverse word, which will be the word of index. Now, if you try to run this, it's going to complain. And it's complaining because it's saying that word of index is not a string, but reverse word is a string. So if it's not a string, you cannot add something with string which is not a string. So that's why I'm going to go ahead and wrap this, and I'm going to turn it into a string. So this is called string interpolation. And make sure that I do it right. There we go. So after this loop ends, the reverse word should contain tag. Now I can simply compare if word is equals to reverse word, then we will return true or else return false. All right, and you can already see if we are passing cat, it's returning false. If I pass something else, hopefully it will return true. There we go. So this is how we have created the palindrome function. And this is just one of the ways. There are many other ways to doing the same thing. All right. So this can be a very good interview question that, okay, how do you make sure that a word is a palindrome? How do you find out if it's a palindrome or not? All right. Any questions? All right. So that will be it for today. If you want more activities, there are a little bit more activities that you can definitely check it out. Let me see if I have that file. I can put it over there in the chat. I can try to upload it just for your own knowledge or just for your own practice. So there we go. That should be on your Zoom chat. You can download it. It has a number of activities which you can do, like creating a function called isEven and finding out if it's even or odd, creating a function isVal, which I think we've already done, and it's palindrome, which we have already done. So it has a little bit more activities, as you can see. Try to do those activities. You know, the more activities you do, the more programming or the code that you're going to write, the better you will, you know, the better it will be. Okay. And it's like a short overview, but hopefully it was a little bit helpful. I know it's very basic. Intro to Swift.Swift. And the code for today, you can have this gist. This is what we wrote. And next time we'll be looking into more of like a SwiftUI, how SwiftUI actually works. But definitely if you are interested in attending that, make sure that you practice Swift language, especially something called closures, or at least look at SwiftUI so that you have some basic idea of how SwiftUI actually works, like a hello world, or even like a button click or a counter. That will be a good example. Like if you can create like a counter in SwiftUI, you click a button and the counter updates the user interface, then I think you're on the right track. That will at least get you started. All right.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions?
If we have any questions throughout the week, would you be opposed to us emailing you, or should we just wait till the following week when we all connect?
You can try to like DM me on Twitter, and I'll see. I'll be able to probably answer a couple of questions depending on the time of the day and all that. I'll be able to look into that. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
All right. Would we be using navigation stack next week? So next week, I don't even know if we're going to go that far because we're just trying to start with SwiftUI. So I don't know if we are even going to go with the navigation part. We'll see. If we reach at that point, we will use a navigation stack. We will, yes. But I don't think we will reach that point, meaning it will be mostly related to getting started with SwiftUI with state, with binding, environment object. So basically state management, which is I think a very important and integral part of SwiftUI. And once we're done with that, I think navigation might be something that you may have to do. We're not going to dive that much into navigation. We might do like a very basic navigation if we even reach that point. All right.
Perfect.
All right, everyone. Well, thanks for attending, and hopefully we'll be able to do this again next week sometime, and it will be on introduction to SwiftUI. So thanks for coming.
Thank you so much, guys. Have a good night.
All right, you too.